The brightest morning. Blinding, buttery sunlight cleaved the sheer curtains, striping John's face. He blinked, a slow, contented smile unfurling as he stretched luxuriously in the king-sized bed. This wasn't the familiar landscape of his old apartment, steeped in the scent of forgotten coffee and old books. This was their new home, its air, crisp with fresh paint and nascent joy, a promise on his tongue. He rolled over, anticipating Lily's gentle form beside him, but her side of the bed lay cool and undisturbed. Already up, then orchestrating breakfast. Her pragmatic spirit, ever present, even on their first morning as husband and wife. He propped himself on an elbow, his gaze drawn to the framed photograph on the bedside table. Just hours old, it captured Lily, breathtaking in ivory, her dark hair a luminous halo around her smiling face, her hand securely nestled in his. He recalled the cool, slender feel of her fingers, and how her eyes, usually so guarded, had sparkled with an unfamiliar warmth as their vows were exchanged. The reception had dissolved into a joyful haze of laughter, clinking glasses, and heartfelt pronouncements. He'd watched her, utterly captivated, as she moved through the room with effortless grace, a magnetic presence drawing every eye. He'd felt like the luckiest man alive, standing there, her husband. A profound warmth bloomed in his chest, a deep contentment that promised a lifetime of shared dawns and whispered intimacies. He'd always admired her composure, her quiet fortitude. He, the open book, tackling problems head-on, while she approached life with a thoughtful deliberation he found endlessly fascinating. He understood her need for order, for foresight, for a haven. He was her anchor, he realized, his smile widening. He would always be there, a steadfast presence in her turbulent world. The future, shimmering before them, felt not merely bright, but perfectly, wonderfully secure. 6 words that changed everything. The morning sun, usually a welcome guest, streamed through the bedroom window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. John, still basking in the afterglow of yesterday's vows, turned to Lily, a tender smile gracing his lips. He reached for her hand, intending to whisper some sweet, newlywed nonsense. Instead, Lily turned to him, her eyes, usually so bright, shadowed with an unfamiliar sadness. "John," she began, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "I feel safe with you, not love." The world tilted. The sun's warmth felt suddenly cold, the dancing dust motes turning into a chaotic swirl in his vision. His heart, which moments ago had been singing, plummeted. He tried to process the words, tried to make them fit into the picture of their shared future he'd so carefully constructed. Confused and already a raw ache forming in his chest, he instinctively reached for her, wanting to pull her into a comforting embrace, to dispel the chilling pronouncement. Lily, however, softly pulled away. The subtle movement was a physical manifestation of the chasm that had just opened between them. "I needed stability, John," she explained, her gaze fixed on the rumpled sheets rather than his stunned face. "A home, security. You offer all of that. You're kind, so incredibly patient. But it's not that special kind of love, the one everyone talks about." Her voice was devoid of malice, just a stark, unsettling honesty that cut deeper than any anger could have. The silence that followed stretched, heavy and suffocating, as John grappled with a truth he'd never imagined, a truth that had just rewritten his entire reality, trying to fix what's broken. The weeks that followed their wedding felt like a performance John was desperately trying to stage. He booked a weekend getaway to the coast, envisioning long walks on the beach, laughter echoing over crashing waves. He surprised her with tickets to a play she'd mentioned months ago, followed by dinner at that new Italian place with the flickering candlelight. Each effort was meticulously planned, an attempt to reignite the spark he feared had dimmed, or perhaps was never truly there. He watched her across restaurant tables, her smile polite, her eyes distant, like windows to a house where no one was home. "This is lovely, John," she'd say, her voice a smooth, even tone, devoid of the genuine warmth he remembered from their courtship. He'd reach for her hand, and she wouldn't pull away, but her fingers would lie inert in his, offering no reciprocal squeeze. One rainy Saturday, curled on the sofa, John finally broached the subject he'd been circling. I've been thinking about that cabin upstate, the one with the lake access. We could start saving for it, maybe even look at plans next year. He pictured lazy mornings, coffee on the porch, a future painted in vivid, hopeful strokes. Lily turned a page in her book, her brow furrowed slightly. That sounds nice, John. Her gaze drifted to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. But isn't it a bit premature? We just got married. She offered a small, almost imperceptible shrug. The air in the room thickened, heavy with unspoken things. He felt a familiar hollowness begin to bloom in his chest. Her words were logical, practical, yet they felt like a concrete wall between them, blocking any path to the shared future he so desperately wanted to build. He tried to catch her eye, to find a hint of longing, a spark of shared excitement, but her attention had already returned to the printed page, her world seemingly contained within its covers. Whispers and secrets. John watched Lily across the breakfast table, her thumb tracing patterns on her phone screen. A small, private smile played on her lips, a smile he hadn't seen directed at him in days. The aroma of brewing coffee filled the kitchen, but the warmth of it didn't reach him. He cleared his throat. "Anything interesting?" she started, the phone almost slipping from her grasp. "Oh, nothing. Just work stuff." She tucked it away a little too quickly. This had become a common dance. Her phone, her attention, and then the sudden dismissal. Later that evening, as he sorted through old photo albums, he heard her voice from the hallway. It was softer, hushed, the kind of tone reserved for secrets. He caught snippets. "Can't talk long, yes. Really?" Then, a hasty retreat to their bedroom, the door clicking shut. He tried to ignore the prickle of unease, to rationalize it as her needing space, needing privacy. But the frequency of these hushed calls, the way her eyes darted to her phone even during their infrequent conversations, began to chip away at his composure. One Tuesday evening, while he was getting a glass of water, he heard it again. Her voice, barely above a whisper, from the living room. He froze, the glass halfway to the tap. "I miss you too." The words, so casually delivered, yet so loaded, hit him with the force of a physical blow. The cold dread that spread through him was immediate, sharp, and undeniable. It wasn't a question of whether he'd heard correctly. The inflection, the almost imperceptible catch in her breath, confirmed it. The silence that followed in the house felt vast and empty, filled only with the deafening beat of his own heart. The unseen smile. John found the tablet tucked between the sofa cushions, a forgotten digital relic from Lily's pre-wedding packing. He intended to charge it, a small act of tidiness, but the screen flared to life, revealing a photo album open to a striking image. It was Lily, laughing, her head thrown back, her hand intertwined with a man whose face was still a blur as he squinted at the glare. Marcus, a name he'd heard once, briefly, dismissed as an old friend. But the smile on Lily's face, a radiant, uninhibited joy John had never witnessed, froze him. It wasn't the polite, reserved happiness she offered him, but an effervescent burst of pure delight, etched with a genuine warmth that reached her eyes. The man beside her, Marcus, gazed at her with an intensity that mirrored her own. His heart began a slow, heavy thud against his ribs. He zoomed in, the details sharpening. They were on a sun-drenched beach, the sand golden, the ocean a startling blue behind them. Her fingers were laced tightly with Marcus's, their knuckles white, a silent testament to a connection far deeper than friendship. He could almost feel the warmth of their clasped hands, the shared laughter in the salty air. He placed the tablet on the coffee table, the glowing image reflecting in his eyes. When Lily walked into the living room, a mug of herbal tea in her hands, her eyes followed his gaze. Her shoulders stiffened imperceptibly. "Who is this, Lily?" John's voice was unervingly calm, a stark contrast to the tremor in his hands. She looked at the tablet, then at him, her expression unreadable. The usual veneer of charming reservation slipped, replaced by a quiet vulnerability. "His name is Marcus," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I met him before the wedding." The admission hung in the air, a silent confirmation of his deepest fears. "And this smile," he gestured vaguely at the screen. "This smile I've never seen." Lily flinched. She set her mug down with a soft clink. "I fell for him, John," she confessed, her gaze fixed on the picture, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I truly did." The silence of goodbye. The clatter of breakfast dishes became a distant memory, replaced by the hushed movements of two people living under the same roof. The vibrant hum that once filled their home had faded, leaving behind an echoing quiet. John found himself listening intently to the absence of sound, no shared jokes over morning coffee, no evening recaps of their days, just the soft scuff of Lily's slippers on the hardwood floors, the gentle click of a door closing. He tried to bridge the chasm with small gestures, a ready smile, a question about her day, but her replies were always brief, polite, and devoid of the warmth he remembered. The distance wasn't a sudden chasm, but a slow, insidious drift. Each morning, the space between their chairs at the dining table seemed to widen, imperceptibly at first, then undeniably. John would watch her, a knot forming in his stomach, as her gaze drifted past him, fixed on some unseen point beyond the window. He yearned to grasp her hand, to demand an explanation for the growing chill, but a fragile hope, thin as ice, held him back. He told himself it was a phase, a temporary shadow. One afternoon, he heard the faint rustle of fabric from their bedroom. He found her standing by the open suitcase, a small, worn leather bag, meticulously folding a sweater. Her movements were precise, economical. She didn't look up as he entered. After placing a final, neatly folded scarf inside, she snapped the clasps shut with a quiet click. She turned, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment, an unreadable expression. Then, she stepped closer, rose on her toes, and pressed a soft, dry kiss to his cheek. It was a feather-light touch, less a farewell than an acknowledgement of something ending. Without a word, she picked up the bag, walked out the front door, and was gone. The house swallowed the silence whole, leaving John standing alone in the vast, empty space, rebuilding from the ruins. The silence in the house was a heavy blanket, each tick of the grandfather clock a pronouncement of his solitude. John moved through the rooms like a ghost, the absence of her laughter, her footsteps, a physical ache. Days bled into weeks, marked only by the growing dust on forgotten surfaces and the increasingly stale air. He'd sit for hours, staring out the window, the vibrant world outside a distant, blurry painting he couldn't quite bring himself to enter. Food held no appeal, sleep offered little solace, and the once familiar comfort of his home had become a cavern of echoes. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, a faint spark ignited within him. One afternoon, he found himself dusting off his old woodworking tools. The familiar scent of sawdust, the satisfying thud of a chisel hitting wood, began to chip away at the emotional ice. He lost himself in the intricate grain, the precise measurements, the creation of something tangible and new. Later, he rediscovered his vinyl collection, the rich, analog warmth of the music filling the empty spaces, not with memories, but with a different kind of presence. Each completed project, each rediscovered melody, was a small victory, a quiet assertion of his own existence. His phone, long ignored, started to buzz with increasing frequency. Friends, sensing his withdrawal, reached out. A text from Mark about their weekly poker game, a call from Sarah suggesting a hike. Hesitantly, John accepted. The first few outings were awkward, his voice raspy from disuse, his smiles feeling forced. But gradually, the genuine laughter of his friends, their easy camaraderie, began to feel less like a performance and more like a reconnection. He found himself sharing stories again, even allowing himself to be vulnerable, admitting the raw emptiness he'd felt. Their acceptance, their unwavering support, was a lifeline. He was still rebuilding piece by painstaking piece, but the ruins were beginning to take on the shape of a new foundation. A letter of regret. Months blurred into a quiet rhythm for John, the sharp edges of his old life finally softening. The scent of pine needles and damp earth from his morning runs had replaced the lingering perfume of Lily's absence. Then, one Tuesday, a thick envelope lay on the hall table, its elegant script instantly recognizable. Lily. He picked it up, the heavy paper cool against his fingertips. No tremor ran through him, no rush of memory. He carried it to his armchair, the one by the window overlooking the fledgling rose bush, and settled in. The anticipation wasn't there. Only a mild curiosity, like opening a utility bill. He slit the seal with his thumbnail. The pages inside were filled with her familiar looping hand, ink bleeding slightly into the cream paper. John, it began. I don't know if this letter will ever find you or if you'll even read it. He continued, his eyes scanning for keywords. Apologies were sprinkled generously, like hesitant raindrops on dry ground. Regret bloomed on every line, a mournful flower. She wished things had been different, that she'd been different. She spoke of missing him, of the quiet strength he'd always offered. There were no tears in his eyes, no tightening in his chest. The words were just words, echoing hollowly in the space where emotion used to reside. He finished, refolding the pages neatly. The sun caught a dust mote dancing in the air, oblivious. He placed the letter back in its envelope, then set it on the small table beside him. There was no anger, no sorrow, just nothing. The quiet hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than any feeling the letter evoked. He realized, with a faint sense of surprise, that he had truly moved on. The true meaning of love. The crisp morning air bit at John's cheeks as he jogged, the familiar rhythm of his feet on the pavement a comforting hum. He paused at the crest of the hill, gazing at the sun-drenched valley below. A quiet, profound contentment settled over him, something he hadn't truly felt in years. It struck him then with the force of an epiphany. He was happier now. Infinitely, undeniably happier than he had ever been during those months with Lily, even before her confession. He'd spent so long clinging to the idea of safety, believing that its presence equated to love, or at least a stable facsimile. He'd meticulously built a life designed to provide exactly that: security, predictability, and absence of chaos. He'd confused the comfortable absence of pain with the vibrant, sometimes unsettling, presence of genuine affection. Real love, he now understood, wasn't a fortress against the world. It was a willingness to brave the storms together, to face vulnerabilities, to trust without the need for constant reassurance. It demanded courage, not just comfort. A wistful smile touched his lips. Letting go of Lily, of the carefully constructed facade they'd maintained, had been the most terrifying decision he'd ever made. Yet it had also been the bravest. He hadn't repaired their brokenness with logic, or patched over their silence with promises. He'd simply stepped away, allowing himself to feel the sharp edge of loss, and in doing so, found a profound peace. The weight of expectations, of trying to force a connection that wasn't there, had lifted. He stood there, unburdened, self-respect a sturdy anchor in his soul. This, he realized, was what true love felt like. Not a possession, but an open hand, ready to give and equally ready to release.